Welcome, everyone, to the Chicago Football Connection podcast. I'm your host, Steve Letizia. Follow me on Twitter at CFC Bears. Joined by my co-host, Luke O'Grady. Follow him on Twitter at Luke O'Grady. We're a month out from the draft, so we've been
Almost
draft
exactly.
heavy. Almost exactly, but we're going to continue to be draft heavy for this
Yep.
foreseeable future. And now, after the trade, we kind of have a good idea of where the Bears sit at pick number
Yep.
9. So we thought it would be a good idea to kind of go through our top 5 of who we want for the Bears to pick, and also our bottom 5 of the guys we don't want the Bears to pick. And then kind of off that, we'll go on tangents like we always do, and we'll cover a lot on here today. So
I think too, like now that it's mock draft season, you start to see like a couple of those people that people are like, consistently mocking to the Bears, and you're definitely gonna have those dudes where you're like, no, like not that guy. Or like, yes, that was exactly what I wanted. So like it's starting to become a little bit clearer who might be in their sights, for good or for bad. And I think it's, probably good to at least get out there the reasons why we think some people would be a good fit and why some people would be like, oh, like a Mitch Trubisky type. Like, what do we do?
Yeah, I mean, I really like. I was putting together my top 5 and my bottom 5, and even like some of the guys on my bottom 5, like I actually wouldn't be that mad about. It was just difficult to come up with 5 realistic options.
And the thing is, too, it's like we don't hate some of the people, but it's like at 9,
right?
It's like well, I don't want to spoil who some people on the list are, but there are some people that if if the polls trades back to like maybe 20 or so, they make sense. But at 9, especially with the way our team is currently built, there are some people that I think would really leave us scratching our heads.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all about value.
Yeah. What do you want to kick? You want to go with our favorites first? I think that's probably easier.
Let's go with our favorites first. Let's start with your 5th favorite. Well, I'll put you on the spot. You go first.
Easy. And like I think a lot of people would probably have him higher, and I think if he had longer arms, he might be a little bit higher. But my 5 Skoronski. I think he makes so much sense. I think he's awesome because like I would love the team that drafts him to give him a shot at tackle. And like it's almost like, okay, if he's not good there, then his floor is, an Ali Vera Tucker kind of type guard where he's a plug and play, start for 8 years kind of thing. He's a great pass protector. He's tenacious. He's a local guy. He's playing at Northwestern. The Bears take, there are other players that we said we'd like to be taken to that position, but, I would be totally fine if they take him at 5.
And Paul said himself they like guys who are local.
They did. And what did you think about that comment? Because I heard some mixed reactions about it. You didn't like it?
No, I didn't like it at all. I think it's stupid. Draft the best players. I mean, if you want to use that as like a tiebreaker, maybe that's fine. But if you're seriously drafting a guy because of that over someone else who's better or something, or is a better fit, that's just idiotic. I think that might be also something they're just kind of saying in the Chicago media. They know the Chicago media eats that up. But in the grand scheme of things, it probably doesn't mean a whole lot.
They brought in Tunyon and they brought in TJ Edwards. So, there's a little bit of smoke where there's fire. And I will say that I do believe when Pohl says that there's a little bit more passion behind, and like maybe you'll put a little bit, because there are those players, especially like everybody it seems that has played with the Ravens the last couple of years, where maybe they play good, but then come like time to sign, like they're asking for trades or they're being really difficult to deal with. So I think that's an aspect of it too, where they play good, and then maybe they're also like, we would both agree it looked like TJ Edwards took a pretty team friendly deal to be with the Bears.
Sure.
And things like that, and even, looking at some of the other tight end deals where like Robert Tunyon took a deal that, I don't know if some other teams maybe couldn't have got him for more. So maybe it's not like you said, if you're drafting someone just because they're from Chicago, you need to reevaluate your evaluation process, but I don't mind it. And I like that Skoronski's a local guy. He's my 5.
Interesting that he was your 5 because he actually ended up in my bottom 5.
Oh.
And he wasn't 5. But it doesn't, like you kind of set it up before we started. It's not that I don't like the player, it's that I don't like drafting a guard in the top 10.
Yep.
If they traded back even to like 12, 13, 14 and pick Peter Skoronski, I would love that. But just at 9, I think is just a little rich. But he's a great player. I mean, like you said, you give him a chance to stick a tackle. If he can't, or if he's even just average there, you might want to just put him in guard and let him become like that Elijah Vera Tucker guy who's a really, really good guard. And in an emergency, if you have to, someone gets injured, you have to kick him back out to tackle. He's not going to kill you.
Man,
So I just think the value is just not there for me. So he ended up on my bottom. But the player, just in a vacuum, the player is fantastic, and you can't really argue with that. All right, my fifth favorite was Christian Gonzalez.
Lovely choice.
Cornerback from Oregon. I made this list earlier today. Now that I'm looking at it, I kind of like want to change it, but I'm gonna stick with it for now. Christian Gonzalez, corner out of Oregon, really good player. He's my cornerback one. I really think he's going to be an absolute stud in the NFL.
Yep.
And the only reason he's a little lower here is because I took need into account in this as well. And cornerback, while I think is a need, is obviously not as big of need as offensive line, defensive line. So he ended up at 5 to me, but I don't know. I think him and I didn't have Devin Witherspoon in my list at all, but he would also be another one. If they did go with him, I wouldn't be mad at either. That cornerback spot, I mean, both those guys are going to be really good. You can't go wrong.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's really hard to find a knock in Christian Gonzalez's game. He is so smooth. His movement kind of reminds me of the way that Jeff Okudah moved a couple of years ago, where you were like, okay, this guy is just like, it seems like he's slightly head and shoulders above the people around him, and he tested like out of this world. The only thing is he seems... Oh my God! I was actually going to say a sentence that's like a crazy thing to say, but he seems like he's like slightly like a really nice guy, and you kind of want your cornerbacks to be like a bit of a dog.
Yeah, he doesn't have that edge. I agree with you there. There's something that's missing from this game. These top three, all three of these cornerbacks, Joey Porter too, are all interesting. And I think depending on what you do as a defense, you're going to like different guys. Like if you're, a press man team, you're going to want Joey Porter. You're going to want Joey Porter probably. If you're a off man team, you're probably going to want Devin Witherspoon. And I think Christian Gonzalez kind of is more scheme versatile. I think he can play more roles, maybe even in his own role. So it's kind of, I don't know. And Devin Witherspoon's also a more physical player, more better tackler, stuff like that. So it just depends on what your flavor at cornerback is. But to me, Christian Gonzalez, I just look just from a coverage standpoint, so smooth, so fluid. His hips, he can open his hips and turn his hips so easily. Just
his hips and feet.
I think he's great.
Now this is we said this earlier, but like for example, let's say my favorite player in the draft was like Bryce Young, and I didn't love Justin Fields. Even though I know Bryce Young won't be there at 9, should we take him or should we take people we think might be there at 9? Because I could kind of go this two ways of list.
I have some people in my top 5 who definitely won't be there. So we can go either way, but
I have one too. I think both of us are like, I think both of us have a pass rusher from Alabama that.
yeah. Well, okay. We'll get there, but yes, that is basically what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, with that, I'll take a player at my 4 spot that I think a month and a half ago there would have been a 0% chance he made it to 9.
Yeah.
But lucky for us, maybe not lucky for us, he has had a train wreck of a pre-draft process. My number 4, guys, is Jalen Carter. I think from a tape point of view, and like even from like an interview and like a personal point of view, up until about a month and a half ago, he was a no-brainer number 1 on this spot. It's a need that the Bears have. He's, I think, tape-wise, the best player in the draft. There's some clips of him like interacting with the other teams before games and some interviews where he's like he's like such a dog. He's exactly the kind of player you want on the defensive line. But man, the only reason he's not number 1 or 2 on this is because of all the stuff that's happened. Not only was there's those character concerns that came, with some of the arrest stuff, or not arrest, but the charges that were laid against him, whatever it was. And then on top of that, when he rebounded and like came and did his pro day, like I think you'd agree, like it looked, I mean, I guess to be fair, his head could be elsewhere, but it really did look like, he wasn't trying at all and he looked out of shape. But if you can put that aside and think, okay, he's going to get an NFL training camp in him, he's going to be in good shape. He's not going to be in bad shape when he comes to play. As a player, this guy is an absolute disruptor. He can play the run. He can play the pass. He's huge, but he doesn't play like he's huge. He's strong. He's quick. I think it'd be a no-brainer. And it's looking more and more that he could slip into that 9 range.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a possibility. He's in my top 5 as well. Obviously, he had to have been. I mean, like you said, if you're just talking on the field, it's a no-brainer. He's a top 3 pick in the NFL draft, and the Bears maybe don't trade down to 9 if that doesn't happen. So Seriously. Who knows how that would have affected that? They might have wanted to stay at 4 or something. But yeah, I mean, he's to me. I agree with you. I think he's on field the best player in this draft. regardless
That's
of
a really good
position,
point.
scheme
You got to
fit. I think
wonder
he's
if
just
like him falling down the board made them say, you know what? Okay, let's just go to 9.
yeah,
That might have been one of those players that said, we don't want to go past 4. We don't want to
right,
lose the chance to get our Jalen Carter. And then all that stuff happened, and they went, okay, you know what? We have enough players in that next tier that maybe we go to 9, and who knows? Maybe even Jalen Carter's there.
right. Yeah,
That's why I got my
honestly, I don't think it's a coincidence that it happened short. The trade happened shortly after all that. So yeah, I think that's no brainer to have in the top 5 there. I have them a little higher, but my 4 is, and I'm going back and forth on this. What I want to do,
I kind of
I'm
feel
gonna,
like
I know I'm gonna go Paris Johnson.
okay.
Jr. I thought about switching him to 3 and moving 3 back, but I'll keep him there just the way I have it. Paris Johnson Jr., offensive tackle from Ohio State. I think he's the best, the second best tackle in this class, but I don't think the other Darnell Wright, my guy, is really in play. So, but
I was so funny. I was going to say, like, I wonder if he's going to do Darnell Wright, because you've been a Darnell Wright stan for a while, for good reason. But as of late, man, he's caught that hype where it's like he might be in this like top 15 pick range now.
Yeah, I mean, he might be in play at 9, maybe if they can't trade out. But the reason I went with Paris Johnson Jr. here is because I think he's a more realistic target for the Bears because he just fits their scheme a lot better than Darnell Wright is. I do think Darnell Wright could fit in the Bears scheme, but I think Paris Johnson just fits everything that they look for in the length, the athleticism, all that stuff. So that's why, from a Bears standpoint, I have him here.
He's like the opposite of Jalen Carter. He has done everything right this process. He's looked amazing. He's said everything right. He seems like such an awesome young man. He's a guy that you want the Bears to add. And I guess to save time, I got him at 3.
Yeah.
I think all the smoke as of late has been Paris Johnson to the Bears, and especially 2 things that I think have made a big deal is he came out and said that he's totally willing to play right tackle. And then yesterday, when Flus was doing his talking, and some stuff that Poles has said in the last 2 or 3 weeks, has put a lot more smoke to the fire about maybe them being willing to move Braxton Jones to the right side if they find like the left tackle that they think would make more sense there. Now, before I was kind of against that idea, but we hadn't heard that stuff from Poles or Eberflus before. And I will say that it's a little bit better to hear that, because if they think that that's something that wouldn't disrupt Braxton Jones' development, then they probably know better than us or have some insight into him being able to make that switch.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they approached Braxton already and said, hey, start cross-training. Like, we don't know where you're going to end up.
Yeah, we need bodies.
You might be on the left, you might be on the right, but like start cross training there. Yeah. Wow. And Paris Johnson, like I would have him higher, but I do think he still have some flaws that needs to work out. You're drafting Paris Johnson in the top 9, not for the player he is, but the player he will be in a few years. So I think he's going to be really good. But it's interesting because like you normally, I mean, I have Wright higher, but Paris Johnson for most people is offensive tackle 1, and in a draft. The offensive tackle 1 is usually a top 5 pick, top 5 player. Yep. And Paris Johnson, is usually in that 10 to 15 range on most big boards. He's not that perfect prospect that we've seen in the past from the offensive tackle position, but because I think his floor might be a little bit lower because he's a little bit raw still. But from an athletic standpoint, like he could be one of the best. He could also be the best tackle in football in 3 years. So that's why he's that high. So you had him at 3.
Had him at 3.
And 4 was Carter. So my 3, this is a little bit of a cop-out, I believe, but my 3 is trade back. I don't know if that was allowed.
We need a body.
I mean, okay, if we're going, if I need to pick someone,
even if you want to throw them at 5 and then bump the first 2 up,
I'll do. No, that's fine. 3, Tyree Wilson would be my 3.
Are you that high on Tyree Wilson, eh?
I like Tyree Wilson. Yeah, I mean, he's kind of basically everything I just said about Paris Johnson, where you're drafting him for the player he will be. That's Tyree Wilson.
And not to mention, he must have the Bears like staff just enamored because I think we both agree that maybe the way he was used, the tape isn't what you'd want it to be for a guy that's that good, but he checks every box, and it's like his highs are like right there from what you'd expect someone to translate to the NFL.
Yeah, he's got a super high ceiling, super low floor. I mean, it's just one of those guys.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, he's probably going to go higher than this. He's most likely not going to be on the board at 9. If we were at 4, if we traded with the Colts and we're at 4, I'd be like, ooh, Tyree Wilson, that's a big risk at 4. But at 9, I'm willing to kind of take that risk of him.
Yeah, I agree. That's a way better slot for him.
Yeah, you take a swing for a home run, and I think that's Tyree Wilson. So I'll put him at 3. That'd be my guy. But yeah, like you said, length. They've been preaching length, and Tyree Wilson definitely has it.
Yeah. Number 2, you want to go?
Okay, yeah, 2. I'll go. So my 1 and 2 are probably fairly obvious at this point, but I actually went with 2. Will Anderson.
You. Yeah, I mean, obviously, Will Anderson. Yeah. I think he had the most sacks in the SEC. He might have had close to the most sacks in the nation. He's been one of those guys that has most sacks pressures the last 3 years. His get-off's incredible. He plays the run well. He can stand guys up. I mean, what more to be said? I think for a couple of years now, everyone's been kind of pinpointing him as the defensive player in this draft. And if it wasn't for the ascension of Jalen Carter, I think it would be a no-brainer. Or also now the fall of Jalen Carter, it'd be a no-brainer that Will Anderson was the number 1 defensive player in this class.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think he's also the safest player in this class too. I think at worst, you're going to get a solid starter. He's like you said, he's good against the run. He can bend. He can rush. He can rush the passer. I wish he had a couple more pass rush moves, pass rush counters. I think he needs to develop that a little bit. I don't think he's he has all the production in the world, but I don't think he's the same type of edge talent we've seen in the past with a Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, those kind of guys. I think he's a tier below that. So that's why I put him at 2. Obviously, what my 1 is Jalen Carter. I could just say that. Everyone could figure that out by now. And I just put Jalen Carter just because I think he's the best player in the draft. So,
I had him. The reason. Just the way everything's fallen out the last couple of weeks is why I had him at 5. But his tape
that makes complete sense.
It's scary good sometimes, and even then, it's I remember me and you talked about this. There were moments when you're watching the playoff games and you were I didn't think Jalen Carter went and did his thing, and then you went back and it was no, he was kind of doing his thing the whole game. He's against in the brightest lights, he was still the player that you expected him to be, and I think. It'll be interesting to see, man. I saw something from the Lions today that said that they were talking to some teammates of Jalen Carter. Did you see this?
No, I didn't see that.
The head coach of the Lions, his name is escaping me.
Campbell
was saying today that they spoke with a teammate of Jalen Carter's, and they said he got some really interesting information from it. And when he got pressed, they were was it good information or bad information? He said, I'm just going to tell you it was really interesting. And I was like, what the... Because my thought is
that's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I guess to be fair, it's always good to hold your cards to your vest. But on a passing comment like that, you'd imagine that if it was good, you could say we've talked to his team and they've reassured us, that he's the kind of man that we'd expected him to be. But he could be playing a little bit of poker. But it was he also is a dude that's prone to theatrics. But it was interesting to hear. Maybe there could be some rumblings that. There are more concerns there than we thought, and there was another comment from a verified account. I can't recall, but they were saying that it was the comment that Campbell was making was in reference to some of the comments that some speaking heads had said 2 or 3 months ago about the character concerns that were initially brushed off, but some people in the building said no, those actually might be pretty real there. There was on the flip side, there was those stories about Jalen Carter buying boys shoes and meals that weren't on scholarship and things like that. So you take the good with the bad, but from a tape point of view, there's no brainer putting at my 1. So I have Will Anderson at my 1. Do you know who I have?
That makes sense. Who is it? Devin Witherspoon.
It is.
Yeah. Okay.
I just think he's gonna add so much tenacity and great against the run. Probably. From as far as I can see, I thought he had the best season in coverage this year. Mm-hmm. I just think it was how do you want him to do it? Do you want him to play man? Do you want him to play zone? He seems like he's a little undersized, but he never looked like he was getting pushed around. He's got a great nose for the football. He is that dog that you want out of a cornerback. And I think whatever team takes him is going to raise the level of their defense instantly. I don't know if, especially considering the Bears are looking for that outside corner, which I think Devin Witherspoon is. It feels like a totally natural plug and play. Poles has said, he values those stopping the pass and passing the ball. So I think he might be someone that he's not exactly the long player that they want him to be. They probably could get enamored by someone like a Joey Porter. I don't know if I would love that. I think Joey Porter's a bit of a project, and I think to some extent his value is based on a lot of Sauce Gardner being as good as he was this year, because as players, they're very similar players. But yeah, I got Devin Witherspoon at my 2. I think he's going to be a great player. He's young. He didn't test in Indy, which I would have liked him to see, because I think he probably would have tested really well.
Yeah.
But I would imagine that he's a plus athlete as well.
Yeah, I can't blame you for having him that high. It's just personal preference. I have Christian Gonzalez higher, but I definitely see why people like Witherspoon. And I will say, I think if the Bears were picking, I think they would go Witherspoon over Gonzalez because of the physicality and the run defense. I feel like they'll value that a lot. The one thing that does scare me is he's like 181 pounds, and I saw there was something like the last cornerback to be drafted at that weight was like in 2017 in the first round. I mean, so that's the only thing. But like, I don't know, that's nitpicking because that doesn't really show up on tape ever because he's good against the run and his physical catch point. Like he plays big, so it's not. So it's like, how much do you weigh that? If it's not a concern on tape.
Do you have anyone that just missed the top 5?
One guy. Okay, yes, kind of. And it's a guy that I really liked when I first watched him early on in the draft process. And but I mean, I had some concerns. He's getting some hype now. It's Calijah Kancey. I had him like just missing it. Like he's super athletic. He weighed in. He weighed in and measured bigger than I thought he would. So that was good. I just don't know if 9's still pretty high for a guy that small.
I saw a crazy stat the other day. In the last 10 years for Power 5 schools, no defensive interior rusher has had a better pass rush win weight than Calijah Kancey.
Yep, I saw that same thing. Yeah,
man, like that's hard to look away from because I'm the same with you. I've kind of come full circle on him. I think me and you were really high on him early, and then it was almost like everybody else got high on him, and then we were like, oh yeah, whatever, Calijah Kancey.
Yeah, right.
But now I'm kind of like, oh, like where it's almost like, yo, where's the Calijah Kancey talk? Like if you draft back into the late teens, like is he still going to be there? Because from like what you want from an NFL today, especially in the last couple of years, like you've realized how much more that interior pass rush is effective. Like where before it was like, you need to get pressure from the edge. If you can collapse that pocket and like, in a phone booth win your pass rush reps, it's really, really valuable in the NFL. And there's every time you get an undersized defensive tackle for the next decade, we're going to be going Aaron Donald. And he's not going to be Aaron Donald, but he does have the ability to rush the passer. And he does have like that strength and a good pass rush kit to be effective at the next level. I totally get it. He was like, it just feels like at 9. Oh man.
My concern is, the tape is really good. And like he has pass rush moves. Like you said, everything you said was spot on. It's just when you get to the NFL, guys are going to be quicker than they were in college. They're quicker and they're stronger. And he was just beating guys because he was quicker than all of them. And if the offensive linemen get a little bit quicker and he has to rely more on his power, and he's not, despite his size, he's not a weak player, and he is like relatively stout, but it's not a strength of his game. So I don't know. I just feel like the best case scenario, you're looking at Ed Oliver probably, because like you said, he's not Aaron Donald. And Ed Oliver, I think, was taken at 9 or 11 or something like that, and hasn't really lived up to that. He's been a good player, but not really a great player. So I think that's kind of where he will end up. So that's why I think he makes more sense in that 15 to 25 range.
There was a lot of smoke the last couple of weeks about the Bears to Ed Oliver, and I was, kind of not outspoken, but I had my piece that I was like, I don't know if we need to be giving up draft capital for this guy to kind of like hope that he'll be the player that he was projected to be. But that being said, man, like if you looked at and like I kind of am with you. I was like, are you gonna be that much better than the people when you're in like when the game is all the people that were the best amongst their peers in college kind of thing?
Right.
But if you look at the names of the people that he had a higher pass rush win rate in a really competitive division, it's like, he was doing better than like Quinnen Williams, who you could probably say right now is there, other than maybe Aaron Donald or Chris Jones, there are very few defensive tackles as valuable as him right now. Dexter Lawrence, things like that. So it's promising. If he can become the player he's supposed to be, he'll be a really, really exciting player. But there's just that chance that he becomes like the next Ed Oliver, like you said.
Yeah, which there's nothing wrong with that, but those guys shouldn't be drafted in the top 10.
Yeah, they move in the top 10.
Yeah, I do think the Bears will be. We've talked about a lot the length, and he has really short arms.
100%.
So I don't know if he's going to be high on there. It's weird because he won't be high on their board. I don't think. Who knows? But just a guess. But at the same time, the Bears defense is one of the only defenses that he would fit into. So it's weird. So he's not going to go to a 3-4. He's not going to be a 2-gapping defense.
Like maybe he would play edge in a 3-4, like an outside tech, I guess, but like a 5. A 5. I agree. I would say just to the same point, I did have Christian Gonzalez right outside there because I'm right there with you. I think he gives me like I don't know if like from a play style point of view they're similar, but from like a discipline point of view and like what you can expect from him as a pro. He gives me a lot of Stephon Gilmore vibes. Really smooth, maybe not a huge playmaker, but like he can kind of control a full side of the field. You don't want to say Darrell Revis, but like it is kind of like that, like super smooth. Maybe not a playmaker, but always knows where his receiver is. Has good feel for the ball in the air, and it's not like he's a bad playmaker either.
No, yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. Yeah, and a guy who just missed mine was also Devin Witherspoon. Devin Witherspoon would have probably been in front of Kancey, to be honest. He was 6, but I only wanted one corner in there.
Yeah,
so,
and then I probably had Jackson Smith-Njigba at like 5.5. If it wasn't for the Darnell Mooney, he would have been like in that top 5 spot, because we are just doing what we want the Bears to do. Like we'll do a big board thing where we tell you our favorite prospects and just how they. It'll also be good too. Like over the years, we'll be able to start to like compare like year to year how our prospects were rated. But Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think, is the best receiver in this draft, and from a value point of view, he makes sense at 9. I just think, we're a year into a rebuild now. We're not like you always should be in a position to take the best player available, but if there's similar grades, you need to take one that fits a need in your team. And I think that Jackson Smith-Njigba, just with the DJ Moore trade, doesn't fit the immediate need right now that would, I think, would be worth using that 9 pick on. I know that we're going to lose Mooney and Claypool next year, and you could look at the situation and say, well, you're going to need a receiver now more than ever. And I get that, but by the same merit, we got 2 first-round picks next year, and we have a whack of money in free agency again next year, thanks to a Justin Field contract, the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah,
I feel like we can address the receiver if we need to, but someone's going to get Jackson Smith-Njigba this draft and be extremely happy.
Yeah. So yeah, he didn't make my top 5 only because of need. That's the only thing. So I have a question for you then. Let's say the Bears were picking at 9, but didn't have DJ Moore. They took an extra first-round pick and took DJ out of it. Where would JSN be in your list here? Would he be?
He might be all the way up to 2, and like
2, yeah,
like maybe even 1, just because like we're not getting Will Anderson. Neither of us probably should have said it.
Yeah, I mean like, Will Anderson and Tyree Wilson probably.
But like he's a killer against man. He's a killer against zone. He went out and ran a 4.5, which is not only not bad, it's actually better than a lot of receivers that are like killing it in the NFL right now. Faster than Stephon Diggs, faster than Amon-Ra St. Brown, faster than Devontae Adams. His agility testing was absolutely elite. The coaching that they have at Ohio State, like these receivers play the game so well. Brian Hartline is just pumping out disciplined, like really like savvy receivers, and the fact that he's got some experience with Justin Fields, it just felt way too good. And I'm saying all this, and I don't even have him in my top 5. But if we didn't have DJ Moore, like I would be banging the drum for him at 9.
Yeah, I think I would have him probably at like 2, maybe just right behind Jalen Carter, because if we didn't have DJ Moore. But the only thing that kept him out was if they picked him, I'd be fine with it. But man, it would just be such a luxury pick at this point. And I know, Mooney and Claypool might not, one or both of them might not be resigned. So next year, wide receiver could be a huge need. But I just think offensive defensive line is such a huge need right now. You gotta they bump those guys up the list.
All right, should we do the fun ones?
Let's do the.
We hate. No, we don't hate. But it's one of those things where it's the same thing with the pick value, where it's like any of the guys we're about to name, if we got them in the 4th round, we would love.
Right.
But and at 9, it's important. This is a pick that's really going to help change and build up, hopefully, one of the offensive defensive line, but at least build up the offense or defense for this team for the next 4 years to come. You can't be taking someone that you're not completely confident in.
Right. And even like my 4 and 5, I would say, if I just struggled to come up with 5 people that I didn't want. So my 4 and 5, I would say if they took them at 9, I'd be fine with it. But
it really boiled down for me to like guys that I keep seeing get mocked to us, and I just think, that's not. I don't know if that's the guy.
Yeah. So do you want to start or should I start? You started last one.
Okay, you go first. Yeah, I like that.
Oh yeah. So my 5 was Lucas Van Ness.
My 5 is Lucas Van Ness too.
Okay, so again, a guy I like. I think he's good. He tested as an elite athlete.
Yep.
I know a lot of people give him some like flack because he didn't start at Iowa, but that's just what Iowa does. They start their seniors and their underclassmen don't start. So that's not a concern for me at all.
And I also think that to some extent they misused him a little bit. I thought they got him inside a little bit too much. He was almost verging on like not 3 tech, but like really inside 5 shade at times. When I think he needs to be outside the tackle, where he can play with his hand in the ground, but from a pass rushing point of view, I think he really needs that momentum build on the outside to get that, because his move is the power move. He hasn't
Yes.
really
100%.
developed his counter moves yet, which you can do. I think that's something that people kind of overestimate is he doesn't really have that much of a toolkit. But you get him in the NFL with some NFL coaches, and you can develop that toolkit. Like you said, he was a good pass rush. He was a great athlete. He didn't get as many opportunities as he could, so he could have performed better. But by the same merit, like what are you getting with Lucas Van Ness? He definitely checks all the boxes that the Bears look into, but I don't know if he was the greatest run defender in his time though he was in the field. And it does look like right now his whole thing was getting up that momentum and being a bull rush player. And that isn't as easily translatable in the NFL when you're playing against dudes that are only there to anchor.
Yeah, I agree. He went. I mean, his bull rush was really his only move. He flashed some other stuff, but it was very inconsistent. And so but I will say that his bull rush is probably the best in the class. Like he is he's a bull. Like he just fucking dominates guys, and he converts speed to power well. He doesn't have a lot of bend though. So if you're playing him on the edge, like he's not going to be that guy who's turning that corner. But he is 270 pounds, so like he's going to be that 4-3 base end. I do like him on the inside too on passing downs. So I know he played a lot inside for Iowa. I agree, probably a little bit too much, but I do
surprised me how much they used him there was all it was. It was like because it felt like his most dominant tape was when he gets a chance to really dig in and get some speed going into a tackle.
Yep. I mean, he made Paris Johnson look bad at times. He made Peter Skoronski look bad at times. He was going up against some of the best offensive tackles in football in the Big Ten there, and did play pretty well. And he's still young. Like I said, he was an underclassman. He's only a redshirt sophomore, so he kind of came out a little early. I think he has a ton of potential. But that's just that lack of bend. That lack of bend is just keeping him from
exactly.
Really loving
it doesn't really seem like he's going to win to the outside shoulder ever. He's going to win through your chest. And it's like you're going to notice with a lot of these players that we have a lot of good things to say about them, but it's just we don't want him to be the player at 9.
Yeah.
So exactly. I got Van Ness at 5.
All right, who do you got at 4?
4, a guy I was high on early, and then now I just can't seem to get myself back to where I was. Just maybe because some other tape from other players have made me go, whoa, like, okay, maybe that's how I would prefer to see this position played. But at 4, I got Bryan Bresee.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to go with a different person, but I think that's a good...
whoever it was, you may still be there, but I got Bryan Bresee at 4. I just think, he was a good athlete, and honestly, I thought that when he went to the combine, he moved well compared to his peers. But he just seems like he's a very stand you up and shed you up player, and it didn't seem like he had a whole lot of impressive pass rush moves. I don't know if he was. I don't again. Maybe I could be wrong, and me and Michael Gus have had some talks about this because I know he's a big fan of him, and I'm saying, okay, prove to me. And he sent me some good tape, but I don't know if I've ever seen him dominate.
Yeah, and I do, Michael. So yeah, Gus definitely is a big fan of him, and he's one of the reasons because I didn't like him that much at first, and he's one of the reasons I went back to him because I do respect his opinion.
Same. Oh, he's one of the best on Twitter as far as offensive defensive line play.
Yep. So, but yeah, I actually didn't have him in my bottom 5, but I probably should have because I would not be. I went in a different direction, but I think that's a good one because I 100% agree. To me, his best reps came playing on the edge.
I think so too.
Not inside. But he's 300 pounds. So is he going to play on the edge in the NFL? Is he a 5 technique? I don't know if he's is he a 3? Is he a 3 technique? I don't know. It's kind of I don't really know where you want to play.
The way the league season was a 3 technique.
Right.
But I don't agree. I think at that 5 and even out 7 was the best. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, he's kind of a tweener to me. And he I mean, for people give, Jalen Carter a lot of crap for lack of production, but Bresee had probably less production. And he's got injury concerns. And I know he had a lot going on in his life with his sister dying and everything. And that is very difficult to play through. So you gotta take the human element into it as well. And that could have definitely contributed. It definitely contributed to maybe his lack of production at times. But just as a player, like I said, the thing that I just keep going back to is all his good, or not all of them, but a lot of his good reps that stick out of my mind were coming from the edge. And I just don't think that's where he's going to play in the NFL.
Yep. Who do you got it for?
My 4 was Peter Skoronski, but kind of like what I said, it was not the player, love the player. It's just the guard in the top 10.
Yeah.
So
100%. It's a pretty easy explanation. He's an awesome player, but like we've said this, there's almost no situation where he sticks that tackle in the NFL.
Yeah.
You hate to say, oh, his arms are 1 inch too short. It's like, Sometimes
It's a
1
big
inch
deal.
matters. Yeah, not
Yeah.
not to make a joke about it, but sometimes 1 inch matters.
Yeah.
There's been, like I was saying, since in the last 7 years, there have been 0 Pro Bowlers at the tackle position that have arms his length. That's not
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah, it's funny because every time someone will say, like, put out something that says Peter Skoronski's a guard, there'll always be a comment from someone saying, well, what about Rashawn Slater? People said he had short arms and he stuck at left tackle. But yeah, Rashawn Slater had 33-inch arms. So it's
Yes,
like,
Rashawn Slater had almost a full inch long arms longer,
right.
and
So it's
that
like,
inch is what we're talking about.
this guy can't play tackle because his arms are too short. It's like, yeah, well, what about that one guy who has longer arms?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like, that doesn't make any
Yeah,
sense.
what about him?
So yeah, but again, nothing against the player, just the value of the position. So then I'll just go to 3 then. My 3 was who I thought you were talking about when you were hyping up for C, was Myles Murphy.
Yeah. Well, he's my 3 too.
Okay. So we're on the same page with who we don't want, at least.
Yeah. Well, it's not that we don't want him. Again, it's that I think he can honestly, and it's similar to the Van Ness thing, where it's like freak athlete, and honestly, I think he's got a better pass rush kit than Van Ness.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think it was honestly like it's similar to kind of how I feel about Parker Washington. It's like really, really high highs, and then disappear for a quarter and a half. And it's like, oh man, some games I need you to take over here. And it's like it kind of felt like he was at his best in like 2020. I thought he was like when it was almost like a little bit more he got like situational reps, and when they asked him to take on a bigger load, I just didn't see him like ascend to the player that you were expecting him to be. Yeah. And you know, like I don't know if like I love the way I saw him move at the combine. He didn't do any of the testing, but he did the movement drills, and I think he bench pressed. He bench pressed fine, but I just kind of cooled off on him the more I've like other pass rushers have raised up my board, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think when we did our edge rankings, both of us had him pretty high, and we talked about him. But yeah, we've both kind of come around on him a little bit. Not that we think we don't think he's a bad player. Just the other players are better.
I think to some extent too, like when we were starting our like rankings, that was near the end of the season, and a lot of that was having watched NCAA games all year and being like, okay, like when I saw Clemson, like wow, the Murphy's plays were crazy, but then when you went and watched the snap by snap for him in a game, it was like, come on.
That's exactly what I was just gonna say. His highlights are really impressive. His actual game tape, if you watch every single snap, is a little less so because he has those flash plays, but then he just, like you said, disappears for a long time.
Yeah.
And like there are so many times when I'll say this about him. One really thing that I really like about Myles Murphy, and he might have the second best in the class. It might be the second best in the class in this area, is his get off and his burst off the line. He's so quick off the ball, maybe only behind Will Anderson, maybe even above Will Anderson. I don't know.
For his
so
size
quick off the ball.
too.
For
he's
his
like
size,
6'5", what, 280?
It's just super impressive. But the problem is he bursts out of his stance, and then a lot of times
6'5",
off the tackles get their hands on him, and he stalls out, and it happens way too often. So he's got that going. He's got the athleticism. He's got that burst, and with good coaching, and if he can use his hands at length a little bit better, he could be really good.
Yeah, I would say of the people we have listed here, he could be the guy that proves us the most wrong because his ceiling is that high, and like we said, like he has those flashes of that ceiling against the best like competition in the nation.
Right. So yeah, again, those are another guy who, if they trade down a little bit, perfectly fine with. If they took him at 9, I would get over it pretty quickly because I do think he has potential. But my top 2 guys though in my bottom 5 are guys that I would hate if they drafted, really even in a trade down as well.
What about if they trade down to like 25?
I mean, if they trade down that far, maybe I'd be like, okay, I get it.
Tell me.
But I'll say like the 2 guys here, I don't think would be available at 25. So
man,
2,
the guy I have at 2 is the reason I kind of included him was because I probably wouldn't even included him if it hadn't been for he's caught a lot of steam as of late. It really seems like this guy could be the first, if not the first or second person at his position off the board.
Okay, I think who is it then? I think I know who you're gonna say.
I got Broderick Jones.
Okay, so he was my 1. I'll just say that he was my 1.
So I think we probably have the same people at 1 and 2. To be honest,
I would say.
So yeah, Broderick Jones. It's like it seems like the things that people love about him have it's like always been he could do this, and it's like okay, well then do it.
Yeah, Broderick Jones' tape is bad. I'll just come and say it's bad. Every time you see next time you see a highlight of Broderick Jones, on Twitter, I guarantee you it's 1 to 2 plays. It's him pulling against Florida and pancaking that corner, and then him pulling against, I think it's Tennessee, and taking out like 2 guys. It's those 2 plays, and that's it. There's never a highlight of him pass blocking because it's not good.
I think that he like people are gonna say, oh, he's a great fit for the Bears because he's long and he's like athletic, but it's like I don't know if he is a great fit for the Bears. I thought he struggled zone blocking, especially getting to the outside, despite the plays that you say, because it's like sometimes you're gonna get a tackle on a corner and he's gonna look like a bad man. But I didn't think he moved well in space or had good sense for how to like close out the lanes for where his running backs were behind him. And I also thought that his worst tape was against his best competition, which, is technically like you expect that to happen. But it's like at the 9th overall pick that, you don't want that to be the case.
Yeah. And Georgia helped him a lot. Their entire offensive line was helped a lot by a lot of play action, a lot of moving the pocket, Darnell Washington chipping, Brock Bowers chipping, quick passes. Like you look at the stats and like, oh, he didn't give up a sack last year. It's okay. Well, if you look at anyone on the Georgia offensive line, they all gave up very few sacks last year. So are they all elite pass blockers, or did the scheme help them? And I think that really helped Broderick Jones. And the thing is, everyone, like you said, everyone says, "Oh, he's so athletic, he's so long." Okay, well, Paris Johnson's more athletic and longer, so why would I draft him over Paris Johnson, whose tape was better? Darnell Wright is almost as athletic and just as long, or I don't know.
My money, I think if you getting your feet set in the ground and pass blocking is the best pass blocking tackle in the draft.
Darnell Wright, yeah.
Not Broderick Jones.
I was like, whoa. And you don't want to.
My number one, and I would imagine, I guess your number 2 is it a running back?
It is a running back. It's any running back, but Bijan Robinson, another guy who's a really good player. I had him at 2 because instead of 1, and I had Broderick Jones at 1 because I think at least Bijan Robinson's tape is good. So I would hate that we had a running back in the top, drafted a running back in the top 10. I would hate that, but at least you're getting a really, really good player who's going to help Justin Fields day 1 and help the offense day 1. So that's why I only.
And it's almost like screw the internet for making me be against Bijan Robinson, because I do love his tape, and I don't know if I don't like the word generational because. Dude, it feels like we were saying the exact same stuff about Saquon Barkley, and then it feels like we were saying the exact same stuff about Christian McCaffrey. It's like, okay, well, it can't be a generation if all these guys were born 4 or 5 years different. That's a generation, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it just doesn't make sense at 9. If like I said, if we traded back, and especially considering I like our running back room, if we traded back and he was there, like maybe it would make sense, and you could just get really excited about all the things you could do with our offense. But we don't need a running back right now, and I don't think that it'll be very. I can't see a time in my life as a Bears fan where, unless we're the best team in the world and we have everyone on contract and the only thing we don't have is a running back, then you just fill that hole. But it just doesn't make sense to me at 9 right now, especially with how much value in the last 5 years the Bears have seen getting running backs in the 3rd to 6th round.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I hate that running backs aren't valued because I would love to have Bijan Robinson on the Bears. It'd be awesome. But yeah, it's just you can't justify that position. And I love having a really good running back on our team. I think it's awesome to have, but I want to find a gem in the 4th or 5th round and hope for the best.
And it feels like with this class too, it's deep, and there's a bunch of really good players that you can get in the 3rd and 4th and 5th round that honestly I think maybe I don't think are better players than Bijan Robinson, but I really do push back on that generational thing because there are players that are nipping on his heels as far as their ability as runners in this draft, I would say.
Yeah. And I think you're right about, if the Bears were in a different position, maybe they would consider it more like the Eagles, for example, who have a really good team and just happen to have a top 10 pick because of a trade. If the Eagles picked him at 10, I'd be like, okay, that's it's still not a great pick because it's not good value, but I could understand where they're coming from there. They have a very complete team that's just going to put them over the top.
That just lost the starting running back.
Just so I could see something like that, but the Bears doing that same exact thing would be crazy.
I heard a cool point from PFF Brad saying, Brad Spielberg, if you don't follow him, foolish Bears follow, and just awesome overall football follow. He does a really good job with contracts and things and projections and things like that. He made he was on the Hogan Johns podcast, and he was explaining that when you take a running back top 10, that running back is instantly going to be like a top 6 or 7 paid player at that position. Whereas, he referenced Saquon Barkley. When you took Saquon Barkley at 2, he was instantly the 5th highest paid running back in the league. When you took Joey Bosa, or when you took Nick Bosa at 2, he was the 38th highest paid defensive end in the league. And that stuff matters. You know what I mean? That shows you that it's like, one, maybe running backs are being paid a little bit too little, but also 2, it means that like from the way that the NFL views running backs, the value in running backs is in the later rounds. Whereas if you can get, a top 30 defensive end in the league in the top 5 picks in the draft, you are laughing. You need to be able to rush the passer in the NFL today.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. That stat that PFF Brad had is a perfect encapsulation of why it doesn't make sense to draft a running back that high. But like, even if they drafted a running back like in the 3rd round, like with that 64th pick, I wouldn't love that either. But I could be like, okay, whatever. Is if you got like Jahmyr Gibbs or something like at that point, like, great. But like, yeah, most likely they're going day 3. I think it seems to me like they want to use a running back by committee approach mixed with Khalil. They've got Khalil Herbert. They got Donta Foreman now. Travis Homer is if they're down back. I think if they draft a day 3 guy and let him compete with Ebner and Homer for that 3rd down back role, like I think that's a perfect use of resources. And, but yeah,
did anybody just miss that top 5 of please do not draft this guy?
Not really. I mean, no one that's like realistic. Like obviously, if they reach for someone that we didn't even consider with the 9th pick, like I'd be upset about that. But I didn't really have anyone specific. Yeah, let's hear.
What would you do? What would you do if at number 9 your Chicago Bears, my Chicago Bears select Anton Harrison? I've seen the smoke.
Really? I would be upset about that. Not because I don't like Anton Harrison. I think I actually really like Anton Harrison. I just think that's too high for him, especially like it. I mean, I would take Anton Harrison over Broderick Jones. I'd say that. But I mean, if Paris Johnson's on the board, you got to take. My thing is, if Paris Johnson, if someone shades in front of the Bears and takes Paris Johnson, let's say, because they think they want Paris Johnson, that means Christian Gonzalez, Devil Witherspoon, Tyree Wilson, maybe Jalen Carter is going to be one of those guys is going to be on the board. So you just take those guys. So I'd only be upset about Anton Harrison because there would definitely be someone who's better than him.
100%
there.
The
but
thing too is
trade back and pick Anton Harrison. I'd be very okay with that.
And I was going to say, I feel like this draft, other than maybe 2 or like someone like a Paris Johnson at the very top, it really feels like the value in tackle of this draft is like 20 to 40. It feels like that's where you're going to get someone like a DeJuan Jones, a Darnell Wright, like guys that, for whatever reason, I don't know why they're not rated higher. And I think that I would much prefer over someone like a Broderick Jones. And honestly, I'm not the biggest Anton Harrison guy. I thought when he was asked to sit down and anchor, I thought he did a bad job of like getting guys to stop in their tracks.
That's his big weakness. I mean, he doesn't have the play strength right now to be an NFL tackle.
I also saw that there might be more interest than people. I guess you wouldn't expect that it would make sense from just a value and pick percentage, but there was someone, I forget who, was saying that there's a good chance that the Bears would be enamored by a player like Joey Porter, and I hate that.
So
I get it; he's long and he's a good athlete.
Yeah,
I honestly have been like, the tape is like really like I think he gets really messy at the top of his routes. I feel like all the highlights that they show is like I don't even know if that's really a highlight. And if he wasn't like as like he does do the good corner stuff where he's loud and he's like angry and he's he's in your face. But I think to some extent, if he was as quiet as Christian Gonzalez, like someone like a Deonte Banks or someone like a Cam Smith or someone even like an Eli Ricks could be higher.
Yeah, I like Joey Porter, but I'm wondering if his name was John Smith, would he be as high? I think people see Joey Porter and like everyone loved Joey Porter.
Yeah,
and he was
100%.
a great player, so he's gonna kind of that bump there. But I do think he's still a good player. I'd be upset with him at 9 only because there would be a corner that I have higher. But I could see myself coming around to Joey Porter if that's the direction they went.
Yeah, he's been all over the place as far. I don't know if you look at grinding the mocks.
I don't as much as I should.
It's really, really good because like it almost feels like you're getting like the Vegas insight as far as like where a certain value is, and it has been crazy the last couple weeks.
Yeah.
Like I've just been so much movement. Like I was seeing like Will Levis is starting to get more smoke upwards that I was like, because I thought he was like trending like this, and then I
Yeah, I thought
saw
so
that
too.
he's actually, man, PFF has him ahead of CJ Stroud right now.
In their rankings,
Yeah, he's like, let me bring it up. PFF
or
big board.
like,
Their big board. He's like
man.
10th.
So I have the quarterbacks on my big board, but I have not watched them to the extent that like I could actually rank them. I kind of have them as it's more of like a feeling where I feel they are,
Yeah.
and because
Yeah, so
the
PFF
Bears don't
has
need a
Will
quarterback, so
PFS top 4 right now. Bryce Young, Jalen Carter, Will Anderson, Will Levis.
really,
I will
that's
say his
surprising.
tape last year was a lot better than his this year. He looked a lot more
Yeah,
comfortable. It looked like he forced a lot of stuff this year. It almost looked like he started to believe in his arm maybe a little bit too much, if you know what I mean. And
yeah,
like
that's
I'll,
surprising.
I know, and like they have another one that's been moving up the board is uh Quentin Johnson is now their number 1 receiver.
Didn't they have Zay Flowers as their number one
Yeah,
for a
no,
while?
their most PFS board, their most recent change has been crazy.
Yeah, is that I don't know if you do still have that up. Who made that board? Or was that just their consensus
That's
board?
their consensus board.
That's their consensus board. Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Wow, that's crazy. I mean, from what little I've seen of the quarterbacks, again, I have not studied them in
Because
depth
we don't
at
need them.
all because we don't need. But from what I've seen from Will Levis, is it's not. I mean, it's not nearly as good as CJ Stroud.
I
That's
was
what I
watching a
thought.
little
But
bit
what
of
do
I
I
was
know?
watching a little bit of Anthony Richardson just trying to get it, and I'll be honest with you, like I'll be straight up, he might actually have like some of the worst passing tape I've seen in a long time.
Oh
This year
really? I
is
thought
like
you were
no,
going to go in the opposite direction.
no.
Because I saw. I mean, again, haven't watched him, but I think sometimes he throws a pretty ball.
He definitely throws a pretty ball, and like I think to be honest, like coming out, like it's similar to like not exactly similar to like a Lamar Jackson thing because Lamar Jackson I think is a way better processor, but Lamar
Yeah.
Jackson fully throws one of the prettiest balls in the NFL. But like I don't think that like excuses some of the decision making.
Sure.
And man, he just makes some bad decisions.
Yeah. No, I saw that too. I mean, I 100% get why someone would take Anthony Richardson top
Oh yeah,
3.
but no, to that point,
100%.
I was gonna say like I was watching some
Yeah.
Anthony Richardson tape from this year, and he had a game. It was Kentucky versus Florida, and man, they both looked bad. Like they both looked like it was like, oh, I could throw more interceptions.
Interception off.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I totally get why a team would take Anthony Richardson more than I understand why a team would take Will Levis. Like, I get the upside play. I
Yep.
mean,
100%.
yeah, I swing for the
Especially if
fences.
you're a team where it's like someone where you could maybe stash them for a year, or you're
Yeah.
not like the team around them is good enough where like if you were someone like the Colts where you have good players around them where you don't need them to win you the game or you don't need them to be the best player in the league year one.
Yeah.
People develop. I had a bunch of concerns about Josh Allen coming out, and
Oh, yeah,
if you can
everyone
get a
did.
guy to learn to play in the system, I think that Josh Allen and a Patrick Mahomes, even though I think Patrick Mahomes was a better decision maker than Josh Allen was in college, but those are two guys that their decision making wasn't great and their processing wasn't great in college, but they
Yeah.
showed all that talent and they showed flashes of really being able to manage the game. And it's like if you can just get them to boil that down and do that on a consistent basis, someone like a Josh Allen and someone like a Patrick Mahomes are going to be the reason someone like a Richardson gets drafted in the top 5.
Yeah. I mean, one of my, I don't know about biggest fear, but I'm concerned that he might go to like the Lions.
Dude,
Because that
it's the
would be
most sense. It makes the
it
most
makes so much
sense.
sense. Like they have Jared Goff. Jared Goff will play out his contract. Then you turn the ball over to Anthony Richardson and hope he's developed over 2 years, whatever it is. And
Lions
like that
got
makes all the sense in the world. Same thing with I mean, that would suck because obviously the Lions are in the division, but I think the Seahawks would be in a similar situation to do the exact
totally,
same thing.
especially
So I don't
with the
think he
one
gets
year.
past those two guys, those two
I know
teams.
if the Lions were smart, I think that one of their first round picks, specifically probably 6, and even then they might even need to trade just with the way that the way that people have been talking about the Anthony Richardson hype. But I think you do everything you can to get Anthony Richardson in the building. If you even have a little belief that he could become all of his potential, you could bring him into the team and straight up not play him for 2 years, and the Lions would be fine. Not only that, they could legitimately still be playoff and deep playoff contenders with the way that their roster is built right now. Or on the really off chance he comes in and he can see the game well and he's instantly like clicks with the team and he usurps Jared Goff. Now that's one of the scariest teams in the NFL.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. They should. It would be. They be. I feel like they'd be stupid. Both those teams would be stupid not to draft a quarterback.
And I would hate it.
I know. And I mean, if everything goes according to plan, and both those teams will not be drafted in the top 10 anytime soon.
I know.
I mean, the Lions and Seahawks, both those teams are playoff contenders at least. So you're not going to be able. You don't have this opportunity again. So get a guy. Even if he doesn't turn out to be anything, even if you're not in love with the guy, just take a chance.
I know.
And you still have a pick in the first round, so you could still get a guy who can help your team this year.
Seriously.
God, it just makes so much sense. I hope. I mean,
I can't believe
I hope the Lions don't do it.
I know. I cannot believe the Lions didn't call the Ravens and say, "Hey, what's Lamar been asking for? Like, what's the situation here?" Because you cannot tell me the Lions aren't a Lamar Jackson away from being one of the threats in the NFC. The NFC's
yeah,
weak.
That's actually a very good point.
The NFC is weak right now. They have 2 first-round picks that the transfer, the exclusive franchise tag would require. I cannot believe they didn't say something. You have to think that there's some kind of weird collusion going on in the NFL that no teams have wanted the services of a 26-year-old former MVP in the prime of his career.
It's insane, and especially I'd actually never really considered the Lions, but you're right. They would give up pick 18. They would still keep pick 6 because that's not their pick.
Year. They have the money
this year. What next year? And you get Lamar Jackson.
I know
you could trade. You could probably trade Jared Goff and get like a second-round pick,
especially after what Ben Johnson did with Jared Goff last year. Made him look like he was good again.
Yeah. So
dude, the Lions draft is fascinating, and they have a chance to absolutely sick in the rest of the NFC North if they do it well.
I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on them. I think they're either going to draft a quarterback, which I would kind of hate, or they're going to draft Jalen Carter, which I would hate. So either way, no matter who they pick, unless they go way off board,
they definitely need a cornerback as well. It'd be interesting to see how they address it. But I hate how much I've liked what the Lions have done. They added Cam Sutton, and they added another 1-year upside deal for a cornerback that I thought was a great choice.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was, but yeah,
it was I think he was from San Francisco. Either way, I thought man, it's funny how fast things turn around.
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't supposed to be a free agency pod, but they did what I wish Poles would have done. Is sign those guys to 1-year deals. Just fill out your roster.
Yeah, so
you don't have to go. I mean,
if we had signed even right now, if theoretically we go out and sign like an Isaiah Wynn, or if we had signed Isaac the guard from the Siamalu from the Eagles, if they had gone and I guess Nate Davis is a good ad, but if they have added a couple more pieces to that offensive line, you could still consider drafting someone like a Jackson Smith-Njigba at 9. But now it's okay, well, we need help on the offensive line.
Yeah,
and Poles even came out and said it this week and said, for the most part, the way we're going to address the holes on the roster, the next step for us is the draft. Free agency, we're going to chill on it for a little bit, which I don't mind, actually. I was telling you this. I'm going to try and put a piece together where the smart money now in the offseason, the money you're going to spend is probably cuts. It's probably people that a player fell to the team in the draft, they didn't expect to be there, and a really good vet just doesn't make sense on that roster anymore. That's what I think Poles is saving his money for, to add a defensive tackle that gets cut, or add an offensive tackle that gets cut. But where it is now, we can't really pass on a trench player at that 9 pick because of the way that Poles is operated in free agency.
Yeah, and that guy might not even be released until training camp. It's very possible that big signing is a training camp signing, which just goes to show that they're not really trying to compete that much this year. Yeah. Because if you get I don't know who it is, but say it's a D tackle who gets released surprisingly in training camp as a cap casualty, you're picking him up. He's going to take some time to adjust but yeah, I mean, even just signing a right tackle just for a 1-year deal. I mean, that just because you sign them doesn't mean you can't take Paris Johnson at 9 if you really like Paris Johnson, but it gives you some leeway. Maybe Paris Johnson goes through training camp and you're like, okay, he needs some time still. He's not ready. You have a fallback. Now you're just throwing him right into the fire.
I know.
We'll see. But
we'll see.
But I think we covered our, who we wanted at number 9, who we don't want at number 9. I think we got it. We talked about 10 guys, so I think that was pretty good.
Only other guy I'd say that I think I've almost come full circle on is I think that Quentin Johnston's going to be a good pro. And we've talked about this before. There's something to be said about you don't want a receiver that's too big. I know that everybody
Yeah.
wants the size, speed specimen, and it's like, oh, he could be Calvin Johnson or he could be Mike Evans, and it's like you'd be surprised how rare they are. The best receivers in the
Yeah.
NFL year in and year out are almost always that 6 foot to 6'2" range, about 200 pounds. And Quentin Johnson tested undersized at the combine. He came in at about 6'2", which would make sense for the way that he moves. And honestly, I would say he's got the best rack in the class. The more I watch him, the more I think me and you were both kind of hard on him. And I would say that if he's not the number 2 receiver on my board by the end of it, he's going to be securely in that 3 spot.
This wide receiver class is so hard to rank.
It is.
I don't know.
And like to some extent, like it's surprising to me that someone like a Zay Flowers and Josh Downs, like I think that's an interesting conversation. I think they play so similar, and like maybe Zay Flowers has better rack, but like to some extent, if you have Zay Flowers as a first round prospect, it's hard that some people don't have Josh Downs as a first round prospect.
I mean that's fair. I think Zay Flowers is just better than Josh Downs, but there's similar players, and I see what you're saying, and I to an extent agree with you there. I think they're similar players. They win similarly. I just think Zay Flowers does everything just like a little bit better. But so I think I have Zay Flowers as I have Zay Flowers as a round 2 prospect.
Do you? Yeah, I think that's kind of like where
I had him at 1, I think, and then I moved him down to 2. So I have him as a high second, top like 30 player, and I think I have Josh Downs in like low second, something like that. So similar.
Yeah, I think it'll probably end up being Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jordan Addison, and then Quentin Johnson for me. And then I think it probably goes Zay Flowers and Josh Jones right there at 5.
I think the way I have it now is JSN, Zay Flowers, Jordan Harrison, Quentin Johnson, but who knows?
That makes sense.
Who knows? We're going to do our big board in 2 weeks. So we'll have our top 100 or whatever we have. Big board. Both of us will have that. We'll put it out on the site too. So expect that in 2 weeks. Next week we're doing a draft roundtable with the Blog Boys podcast. I don't know if I got that right. But Tommy Cavanaugh and Michael Snyder.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. Those guys are if you don't already follow them, they've been great follows during the draft process. Those are guys that, there's a handful of guys where it feels like you're just hearing things that they hear through other people regurgitated, and these guys are going and watching the tape themselves, which, say what you will, at the very least, they're going to have an original opinion.
Yep. Yeah, that's really all you can ask for. I don't claim to know everything about football or anything about the draft, but both of us, we put in the work. So we might be wrong, but we're
if we're gonna get the answers wrong on the test, at least there are answers.
Exactly. So we're doing that next week. We'll tweet out a bunch of that stuff like that. That should be next Wednesday. We'll probably go live, so keep an eye out for that. So make sure to follow us on Twitter so you don't miss that. Like, subscribe, all that stuff, and bear down, everyone. Until next week.